I trusted you. How could you do this to me?
You really thought I would ever choose you?
You can't stop my ex from visiting me. Elena, you're a slave to this life I've built for you, and slaves don't get to choose the guests. The words hit harder than any physical blow. Elena stood in the center of their marble-tiled foyer, the silence of the penthouse ringing in her ears. Julian didn't even look at her as he adjusted his cufflinks. He spoke with the casual indifference of a man discussing the weather, not the destruction of his wife's dignity. Behind him, Chloe stood framed in the doorway. She was draped in a trench coat that cost more than Elena's first car, a coat Julian had told Elena was too ostentatious when she had pointed it out months ago. Seeing it on his ex-wife felt like a jagged glass shard twisting in Elena's chest. "Julian, please," Elena said, her voice a fragile thread. "It's our 5th anniversary. I spent all morning preparing. I thought we were finally finding our way back to each other." For a fleeting second, a memory of happiness flickered in her mind, the way Julian used to look at her when they were first dating. Like she was the only light in a dark room. That memory was a cruel ghost now. Julian finally turned, his eyes cold and clinical. "We are exactly where we need to be, Elena. I provide the world. You provide the presents." Chloe's pipes burst, and she's staying in the guest suite. It's not a request. It's a notification. Chloe stepped into the light, her heels clicking rhythmically against the floor. "Don't be so sensitive, honey," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "I'm sure a sweet, quiet girl like you can manage to be a good hostess. After all, I taught Julian everything he knows about taste." Elena felt the air leave her lungs. "You're bringing her into our sanctuary? Today?" Julian leaned in, his shadow towering over her. "Sanctuary? This is my property. You enjoy the credit cards, the cars, and the reputation. That comes with a price, Elena. The price is your silence." He reached out, tucking a stray hair behind her ear with a gesture that looked like affection but felt like a threat. "Go put on a smile. We have dinner reservations, and Chloe is joining us." Elena's hand moved to her pocket, her fingers brushing against her phone. She felt a surge of profound sadness, not for the marriage she was losing, but for the woman she had allowed herself to become. Just as Julian turned to grab Chloe's luggage, his phone vibrated violently on the console. He glanced at the notification, and the smug arrogance on his face vanished instantly. His skin turned a sickly shade of gray. "What is this?" he whispered, his voice cracking. This can't be happening." He looked at Elena, his eyes wide with a sudden, frantic fear. Julian's fingers trembled as he swiped across the screen of his phone. The arrogance that had defined his posture only moments ago evaporated, replaced by a frantic, sweating desperation. He looked at the device as if it were a live grenade. "Julian, what's wrong?" Chloe asked, her voice losing its sharp, mocking edge. She reached for his arm, but he flinched away, his eyes locked on Elena. Elena felt a strange, cold calm settle over her. The sadness was still there, a heavy weight in her stomach, but it was being crowded out by a flickering spark of curiosity. "Is something the matter, Julian? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Shut up," he snapped, though the command lacked its usual bite. He began pacing the marble floor, his breathing shallow. "It's a glitch. It has to be a glitch. My private offshore account, the holdings are showing a 0 balance. And there's a message." He stopped, staring at a text from an unknown number. It contained a single image, a photo of the very wedding contract Elena had signed 5 years ago, but with a red line drawn through the no alimony clause. "Who did you talk to?" Julian hissed, lunging toward Elena. He grabbed her wrist, his grip bruising. "Who have you been seeing behind my back? You're a housewife. You don't even know how to log into these accounts." Elena didn't flinch. She looked down at his hand on her wrist, then back up at his panicked face. "I told you, Julian, I've been right here. Being the beautiful addition to the furniture you asked for." Chloe stepped forward, her eyes darting between them. "Julian, honey, you're overreacting. It's probably just a bank error. Let's just go to dinner. We can call the manager in the morning." "It's not an error," Julian yelled, the sound echoing off the high ceilings. "The entire portfolio for the development project, the one my father's reputation is riding on, it's been diverted. All of it. The threat was no longer just emotional, it was existential. If that project failed, the world Julian bragged about building would vanish overnight." His reputation, his power, and his ability to treat people like playthings were all tied to those numbers. Elena watched him, a slow, methodical realization dawning on her. She remembered the charity work she'd been doing for the last 6 months, the long hours at the community center, the friendships she'd made with people Julian considered beneath him. One of those people was a retired forensic accountant who had seen the bruises on Elena so long before she'd admitted they were there. "You should take that call, Julian," Elena said softly, nodding toward his phone as it began to ring again. The caller ID showed his father's name, the one man Julian feared more than anyone. Julian's face went from gray to a ghostly white. He looked at the phone, then at Chloe, then at Elena. "If you did something," Julian whispered, his voice thick with a sudden, sickening realization, "I will make sure you never walk in this city again." The phone kept ringing. The sound was deafening. The ringing of the phone was a rhythmic torture. Julian stared at his father's name on the screen, his chest heaving. He finally swiped to answer, his voice cracking as he forced a greeting. "Dad? Yes, I just saw the notification. No, there must be a misunderstanding." As Julian stepped into the study to endure his father's wrath, the silence in the foyer became heavy and suffocating. Chloe stood there, her designer coat suddenly looking like a costume that no longer fit the scene. She looked at Elena, her eyes narrowing as she searched for a sign of weakness. "You look far too calm, Elena," Chloe whispered, stepping closer. "What did you do? You've always been the quiet little mouse, scurrying around to please him. You don't have the spine for a move like this." Elena felt a surge of cold, sharp clarity. The sadness that had clouded her vision for years was finally lifting, revealing the jagged reality of her life. "Maybe I just stopped caring about the cheese, Chloe, and maybe you should worry about where you're going to sleep tonight. If Julian's accounts are frozen, this penthouse is the first thing the creditors will look at." Chloe's face contorted. "He'll fix it. Julian always fixes things. He'll crush you for this." "He can try," Elena said, her voice steady. She walked toward the kitchen, her movements fluid and purposeful. She began to pour herself a glass of water, her hands perfectly still. "But it's hard to crush someone when your own floor is collapsing." The door to the study slammed open. Julian emerged, looking aged by a decade. His eyes were bloodshot, and he was clutching a folder he had grabbed from his desk. "My father is coming here. He says the board has received an anonymous tip about the creative accounting I used to fund our lifestyle. Elena, they mentioned the offshore shell company you helped me sign for last year." Elena took a slow sip of water. The legal convenience he had mocked earlier was now his greatest liability. She had signed those papers because he told her she had to. She hadn't mentioned that she had taken photos of every page before the ink was dry. "Why are you looking at me?" Elena asked, her tone innocent. "You said I was just furniture, Julian. Furniture doesn't file SEC whistleblower reports." "You wouldn't," he breathed, the threat in his voice replaced by a growing horror. "That would destroy you too. You're my wife. You go down with the ship." "A slave has nothing to lose when the plantation burns," Elena replied. The line felt like a vow. Suddenly the intercom buzzed. The doorman's voice came through, sounding strained. "Mr. Sterling, there are some gentlemen here from the Internal Revenue Service. They have a warrant. And they say they're looking for a Mrs. Elena Sterling?" Julian's grip on the folder tightened until his knuckles turned white. He looked at Elena as if seeing her for the very first time. The word warrant hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Julian's phone slipped from his hand, clattering onto the marble. The sound seemed to snap Chloe out of her trance. She scrambled toward the hallway, her poise vanishing. "I can't be here for this, Julian. My reputation, my brand, I'm a guest." "I didn't see anything. Stay where you are, Chloe." Julian roared, but his authority was crumbling. He turned to Elena, his face a distorted mask of rage and pleading. "Elena, listen to me. Whatever game you're playing, stop it now. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you handled the filings. If you take the fall, I can hire the best lawyers. I'll give you anything. You want the house? The jewelry? It's yours." Elena watched him, a hollow feeling of pity washing over her. This was the man she had loved, a man who, even at his lowest, saw her only as a shield to be used and discarded. The happiness she once felt in his presence was a distant, unrecognizable dream. "You're still bartering, Julian," Elena said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Even now, you're trying to buy my soul. But you don't realize I've already spent the currency you gave me. The heavy thud of footsteps echoed from the hallway. 3 men in dark suits appeared, led by a woman with a sharp gaze and a badge clipped to her belt. Julian stepped forward, his professional mask sliding back into place with practiced ease. "Officers, there's been a massive misunderstanding," Julian began, his voice smooth and manipulative. "My wife has been struggling with emotional issues. She's been handling some of our personal accounts and may have made some clerical errors. We were just discussing how to rectify it." The lead agent didn't look at Julian. She walked straight to Elena. "Mrs. Sterling? I'm Special Agent Vance. We received the encrypted drive you sent to our tip line. We verified the ledger entries." Julian froze. "Encrypted drive? Elena, what is she talking about?" Elena looked at the agent, then back at her husband. "The silence you bought for 3 years, Julian. It gave me a lot of time to observe. You told me I was a slave to your lifestyle. You forgot that a slave sees everything the master thinks is hidden." Chloe let out a sharp, panicked sob. "I had nothing to do with his money. I just wanted my coat back." Agent Vance signaled to her colleagues. "Mr. Sterling, we have a warrant to seize all electronic devices and financial records. And Chloe, Miss Sterling, you will need to remain for questioning regarding the offshore transfers made in your name last month." Julian's eyes went wide. He looked at Chloe, then at the agents. The betrayal was a physical weight, pressing him down. "My name? Chloe, what did you do?" I didn't think she'd find out." Chloe shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at Elena. But the real blow was yet to come. Agent Vance stepped closer to Julian. "Actually, Mr. Sterling, we aren't just here for the taxes. We received a call 10 minutes ago from your father's attorney. He's cooperating." Julian collapsed into the velvet armchair, the air rushing out of him as if he'd been physically struck. "My father?" he whispered, his voice a ghost of its former arrogance. "He wouldn't. He's the one who taught me how to manage the margins. He's also the one who taught you that the family name is more important than any individual member," Elena said, her voice steady and cold. She walked over to the console and picked up Julian's discarded keys. "He realized months ago that you were becoming a liability. He just needed a reason to cut the cord without getting his own hands dirty." Agent Vance nodded toward her team, who began systematically tagging laptops and filing cabinets. "Your father provided the decryption keys for the second set of books. Mr. Sterling, it seems someone warned him that the ship was sinking, and he decided to jump first." Julian looked at Elena, his eyes narrowing with a sudden, venomous clarity. You went to him. You went to the lion's den to sell me out." "I didn't sell you out, Julian. I showed him the mirror," Elena replied. She felt a flicker of the old sadness, a grief for the life she had wasted trying to be enough for a man who was never whole. "I told him that if he didn't help me clean up your mess, I'd take the evidence to the press instead of the authorities. He chose the lesser of 2 scandals." Chloe was pacing by the window, her hands tangled in her hair. "This wasn't the plan." "Julian, you told me she was stupid to notice the transfers. You said she was just a placeholder." "Shut up, Chloe!" Julian screamed, his composure finally shattering. He lunged toward Elena, but the agents were faster, stepping between them. "You think you've won? You're losing everything too. The clothes, the status, the name. You'll be back in that cramped apartment with nothing but your pride." Elena smiled, and for the first time it was a smile of genuine, radiant strength. "I've lived in a cage made of gold for 5 years, Julian. I think I can handle a small room with a view of the truth." The threat of immediate arrest loomed, but the agents were waiting for one final piece of the puzzle. Agent Vance checked her watch. "The transfer should be complete now." "What transfer?" Julian hissed. "The one you authorized in the prenuptial amendment you signed last night," Elena said. Julian stared at her. "I didn't sign any amendment. You signed the anniversary papers I gave you while you were distracted by Chloe's arrival." Elena reminded him. "The ones you didn't bother to read, because you were too busy calling me a slave." The room went deathly quiet. Julian's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He had been so blinded by his own perceived power that he hadn't realized he'd signed away the very foundation of his defense fund. The air in the penthouse felt thinner, as if the very walls were beginning to shrink. Julian stared at Elena, his face a grotesque mask of disbelief. "The anniversary papers? Those were trust updates for the estate. I didn't even look at the middle pages." "I know," Elena said, her voice dropping to a level of chilling calm. You were so busy making sure Chloe's luggage was handled that you didn't notice the clause regarding moral turpitude. Or the one that transfers the holding company's voting rights to the primary spouse in the event of a criminal investigation. You taught me that the fine print is where the real power lives, Julian. I just finally read the book. Chloe let out a strangled cry. The holding company? That's where the settlement funds were supposed to come from. Julian, you promised me. Get out, Julian whispered, his eyes never leaving Elena. What? Chloe gasped. Get out! He roared, slamming his fist onto the marble table. The vase of lily wobbled and fell, spilling water and white petals across the floor like a funeral shroud. Agent Vance cleared her throat. Actually, Miss Sterling, you aren't going anywhere. We have a car waiting downstairs to take you both to the field office. Mr. Sterling, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud and tax evasion. The click of the handcuffs was the most honest sound Elena had heard in 5 years. It was sharp, metallic, and final. Julian's hands were pulled behind his back, his expensive suit jacket bunching up around his shoulders. The image of the powerful, untouchable Titan was gone. In his place stood a panicked man who had lost his grip on the world. You think this makes you strong? Julian hissed as they began to lead him toward the door. You're nothing without me, Elena. You'll be a headline for a week, and then you'll be the woman who destroyed a dynasty. No one will touch you. You'll be alone. Elena walked toward him, stopping just inches away. She didn't feel the fear that had defined her marriage. She didn't feel the desperate need to defend herself. She felt only a profound, quiet sense of self-respect. I'd rather be alone and belong to myself, she said softly, than be in a room with you and be a ghost. As the agents led them out, the elevator doors slid shut, leaving Elena in the sudden, jarring silence of the penthouse. The sanctuary was empty. The risotto she had spent all morning preparing was cold on the stove. She walked to the window, looking out over the city. She was finally free, but the cost was visible in the debris of her home. Then, her phone vibrated in her hand. It wasn't a text from a lawyer or an agent. It was an incoming call from an unlisted number, the one person who knew exactly where the rest of Julian's skeletons were buried. Elena stared at the screen. The number was unlisted, but she knew the pattern. She swiped to answer, her heart hammering a steady, rhythmic beat against her ribs. It's done, a gravelly voice said on the other end. It was Marcus, Julian's former head of security, a man Julian had fired 6 months ago without a severance, purely to prove he could. The server in the basement of his father's estate has been mirrored. Every email, every deleted wire transfer. It's all in the cloud now. Thank you, Marcus, Elena whispered. You're sure his father can't bury it? Not even the old man can stop a leak this big. By tomorrow morning, the board will have no choice but to liquidate. You held your nerve, Elena. Most people would have folded when he brought the ex-wife home. He thought her presence would break me, Elena said, looking at the scattered lily petals on the floor. He didn't realize she was the final piece of evidence I needed. Her arrival proved his pattern of using people as assets. It made the moral turpitude clause undeniable. Elena hung up and looked around the cavernous living room. The silence was no longer heavy, it was spacious. She felt a strange flicker of happiness, not the frantic, desperate joy of a pleaser, but a slow, burning warmth. She was no longer waiting for permission to exist. She walked to the guest suite where Chloe had planned to stay. On the bed sat Chloe's expensive trench coat, abandoned in the chaos of the arrest. Elena picked it up, feeling the weight of the fabric. It was beautiful, but it felt tainted. She realized then that Julian's power wasn't in his money. It was in his ability to make everyone around him believe they were nothing without his brand. A sudden knock at the door startled her. She wasn't expecting anyone else. Through the security camera, she saw a man in a delivery uniform holding a large wooden crate. Elena opened the door cautiously. I didn't order anything. To be opened at sunset. Elena signed for the crate and watched him leave. She grabbed a heavy kitchen knife and pried the lid open. At the base was a gold plaque that read, Property of Julian Sterling. Always mine. The cruelty of the gift was breathtaking. He had planned this weeks ago, a permanent reminder of her status. But as Elena looked closer, she noticed a hairline fracture in the marble bird's wing. She realized the gift was hollow. She tapped the marble and it rang with a metallic echo. There was something hidden inside the statue, something Julian had been hiding in plain sight. Elena stared at the marble bird, a symbol of Julian's perceived ownership. With a steady hand, she picked up a heavy decorative paperweight and struck the fractured wing. The marble shattered, revealing not just hollow space, but a thick, waterproof pouch tucked inside the bird's chest. Inside the pouch were the physical deeds to a series of properties in Europe, the emergency exit Julian's father had never known about. Along with the deeds was a handwritten ledger of the true accounts Julian had skimmed from his father's own empire. Julian hadn't just been a cruel husband. He had been a parasite to his own bloodline. Elena felt a final surge of sadness for the man who lived his life in such constant, calculated fear that he had to hide his heart in a stone cage. Then, the sadness vanished, replaced by a crystalline clarity. She didn't want his stolen millions. She didn't want his hidden world. "I have the final ledger," Elena said, her voice echoing in the empty hall. "I'm leaving it on the kitchen island. I won't be here when you return." She didn't take the designer dresses or the diamonds Julian had used to chain her to his side. And the photograph of herself as a young woman before she had learned to shrink her soul to fit into his penthouse. As she reached the door, her phone buzzed one last time. It was a recorded message from the holding facility. Julian's voice, stripped of its polish, sounded raw and broken. "Elena, please. I'll give you the world, Elena. Just don't leave me." Elena listened to the end. She thought of his words from that morning. "Cruelty is loud, self-respect is quiet." She didn't reply. She didn't need the last word because she finally had the last breath of freedom. She deleted the message, blocked the number, and set the phone face down on the marble console. Stepping out onto the balcony, she watched the sun dip below the skyline, painting the city in shades of gold and violet. The air was cool and smelled of rain, not funeral lily. She looked at her reflection in the glass, not a slave, not furniture, and not a victim. She was a woman who had walked through fire and come out holding her own hand. "I choose me," she whispered to the wind. Elena closed the door to the penthouse behind her. She didn't look back at the silver cage. She walked toward the elevator, pressed the button for the ground floor, and stepped into a world that was finally, beautifully, her own.